Hi, welcome to the Blackmagic Collective and to the newest installment in the Art Tech series, which is a series we do that shows the combination of the art side of filmmaking and the technology. I wanted to encourage you, first of all, I have my little card, so forgive me. Make sure to let us know who you are on the stream down below or wherever you are, whichever streaming service you're using right now. Make sure in the comment box you let us know who you are, where you're from. We want to know everything about you. Let me explain a little bit about the collective first, if you're new to us here. The Blackmagic Collective is a user group made for filmmakers by filmmakers. It covers every range of filmmaking expertise from the very beginner to the very experienced. And we're all about supporting each other in the community of raising awareness, education, and support and camaraderie. So if you haven't joined the collective, please make sure to do so. It's free, and you get a lot of stuff as a benefit, including amazing streams like we have today, the film festival, which I'll talk about in a second, lots of giveaways throughout the year or different opportunities. So it's all a little strange now with COVID, so we're never sure what opportunities we have, but they have been many in the past and will continue to be so in the future. About the film festival, we do a Blackmagic Collective Film Festival every year. The festival itself is in November, and it is a big event we usually do, whether online or live, and give away a lot of great prizes, including cameras from Blackmagic Design. We give away cash. We've given away cash in the past, lenses from Sigma, all sorts of great stuff in the past, and we'll continue to do so. The way you join is, or take part of that, is you submit a 5-minute or less film to the festival. You can submit it all throughout the year, and I think our cutoff is the end of October, roughly. We choose a film almost every month, or a couple of films sometimes, and those go into the contest. And so then at the end of the year in that November event, we do a big festival where everybody gets to vote on the fan favorite film, and we have a board of advisors of professional filmmakers that vote on films, and everybody gets to win, and it's a lot of fun. The neat thing about the festival is that even the audience gets to win a camera as a prize under the Audience Choice Award. So make sure to check that out when if you sign up for the newsletter, and for the collective, you'll get notices about that. So that's great. Next card. I want to thank Blackmagic Design, who is our major sponsor here. They have always been great in supporting filmmakers of all levels, and we are no exception. We love them, and they make everything we do here possible. So questions. If you have questions today, we are going to leave ample time for questions halfway through this event. So we know everybody has a ton of questions about this topic. So make sure to ask them in the comment fields, and we have somebody monitoring that, Kayla, behind the scenes, and she'll let us know what questions you have, and we'll put them up on screen, and we'll try to answer them as many as we can. A little bit about me real quickly. My name is John Parento. I'm a filmmaker, an entertainment consultant, a writer, a producer, a cinematographer, a visual effects supervisor. I've done it all. I've been in the industry for over 30 years, and I love it. And I love being part of the collective because I love supporting filmmakers as well. One of our guests just got a phone call. So let's talk a little bit about what this event is that we're doing. So let me slide around to my chair here. So virtual production is the big hot topic these days in the industry, isn't it? So what we've done today is we've wanted to address the application of virtual production in the indie world. A lot of people talk about doing projects that are high budgets and things that not all of us can afford, or not many of us can afford to do. But actually, virtual production is very accessible to an indie market as well. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. And that's one of the reasons why we want to leave a lot of time for questions, because everybody's situation might be a little bit different. So I want to introduce, my earbuds coming out. I want to introduce two guests. First, Jocelyn Su, who is the co-founder and chief product officer for ARwall.
Hi, thanks for having us.
Okay, everybody turn their mics on. Great, you guys are smarter than I am. And then Renee Amador, who is the co-founder, CEO, and president of ARwall.
Hello, John. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, welcome. Thanks for coming. So let's talk a little bit about, let's give kind of a framework here about what virtual production is now. Everybody talks about the Mandalorian, okay, as sort of the first big example of what virtual production is. So you'll have to decide who wants to speak about this first. Let's talk a little bit about their setup. What do they use for virtual production?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Mandalorian was famous for being one of the first major projects to do these type of LED backdrops with camera tracking, with real-time environments, everything like that. So I believe most of that work was done. The actual content was Unreal Engine, and then the screens were a Row Black Pearl, a brand of LED screens. I believe it was 2.6 millimeter, somewhere around there.
Explain.
Oh
Just
yeah,
touch
yeah.
briefly what
Okay.
that means.
2.6 millimeter pitch. Okay, so this is the if you're new to this side of LED backdrops and that type of stuff, you're going to have to learn what pitch size is. So basically, pitch size describes the space between the pixels, the diodes on the actual LED screen. So the smaller the distance, the smaller the pitch size. So what you're looking at behind us here is 1.5 millimeters. So that means there's 1.5 millimeters between each pixel. So 2.6 millimeter would mean that there's 2.6 millimeters. So however way you want to say it's better or more dense, lower pitch size will mean higher density. Higher pitch size will mean less density. So what people are familiar with, like with outdoor billboards, those are very, very high pitch screens, like 4.8 or 8 millimeter, 12 millimeter, even in those cases.
Because you're seeing them from so far away, you don't have to have that pixel tightness, right?
You've got it. Your eye basically blends in the pixels together, just like what you're seeing here behind us, except that it does that at a much greater distance, which allows you to get away with less pixels.
Okay, so the Mandalorian, they're using a bigger, what do they call it again? What's the term again?
Pitch size. Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
you can say pitch or you can say density or whatever is easier for you.
I
So
want to say pixels. That's my problem. So
I know,
it's not pixels. It's actually the diodes, right?
exactly. I guess the comparable thing to think about would be like DPI, like dots per inch, that type of thing. Yeah. So in the case of Mandalorian, and in most of these types of virtual production shoots where they do in-camera effects with LED, the screens are very large. They're pretty far away, like over 20 feet away from the camera. And that requires them to be huge. And oftentimes they're also curved, like there's a horseshoe shape and then the ceiling panels as well.
Okay. And so we'll go to Jocelyn on this. Why did Mandalorian choose to use this technology? Do you know what the reason why they kind of jumped into this? Just vaguely.
Because it's a really cool thing to do with filmmaking, and they can. I imagine why I would do it. And partly why we got into this was, the way to do this beforehand was green screen, and everyone knows how green screen works. It's on every major blockbuster film. Well, everyone uses green screen to get the effects of not being able to actually shoot something in real life. And with virtual production, it's kind of like a new turn of visual effects now, because instead of having a green wall behind the actor and then everyone on set kind of pretending they know what's back there, and maybe some people actually do, but most people are just kind of guessing like, oh, it's green back there, so someone will fix it in post. And what's really exciting about virtual production is that, especially with LED walls, is that you can now everyone on set can actually see it. So something I should note out right now is that the main camera that we're using right now, this camera isn't being tracked. So this is actually this perspective. And you probably saw as we started this shoot that like the background was moving, and you can kind of see it was a little kind of a warped or just kind of a different perspective for this camera right here. And that the reason for that is because the first camera we started with, that's the one that's being tracked right now. And so when this camera moves around, the background will move. And so there's kind of like, that's kind of to give you an idea of how this technology works on set, is that this camera right now is really what every cast member and crew member is seeing on set. So nobody's really guessing what's back there. Like we can all look back here and see this LED wall and go, oh, there's like some ships flying by. There's these blue lights and all of this. So I think that's really a big difference between why people want to do virtual production now, is because it brings the collaborative effort back on set together, because that visual effects artist can actually be on set and make changes on the fly on these LED walls. And that's really exciting, because I think that's where filmmaking started, was everyone was on set to kind of make this magic happen. And then we kind of lost that a little bit with green screen, because then a bunch of this post team had to do it offsite way after filmmaking is done on production. But now we're kind of bringing everyone back on set and saying, let's just get this shot like finalized in camera and we're done. Like we don't have to do as much work in post anymore.
I think the other advantage is that you don't have to travel people necessarily to bizarre locations. You can send out a small crew to shoot plates for you, for example, or obviously in CG with Unreal, you can generate fantastic locations like this, and without it really any problem for big crew travels or expenses, stuff like that. So I think that kind of really might resonate with the indie filmmaker as much as anything. The chance to be able to do a little bit more of a fantastic concept without going crazy with the budget. So
exactly.
Yeah.
There's also creative benefits as well. I think some of the ones that came into play for Mandalorian, for a lot of the other projects that we've been engaged with, were things like reflections. People had shiny suits, or they have some type of glass visor or something like that. And it's in those situations, like you can see here, I don't know if you can see it, but with my glasses, like as the refraction as the photons go from the screen through my glasses, it refracts and everything like that, and you get all that stuff for free because this is real photons coming out, bouncing everywhere, and then going into the lens, right?
Right.
So that's one of the other major benefits. So if you have an environment where there are a lot of reflective surfaces, translucent surfaces, glass, ice, that type of stuff, this is going to be a better choice versus green screen in those cases, because you avoid a lot of the issues with translucency in green screen. That
Yeah, I
can be
think
complex.
a lot of people will use it. This is a good indie tip as well. If you have a film that's all set in a car driving across the country or something like that, it's very expensive to travel the crew unless you do it really raw. But if you can actually work out an LED solution, you can have them in the car, you can have interactive light on the windshields and the chrome, and you can have moving background and everything in sync, and the camera can still move around and get the parallax like you were talking about without actually going anywhere. So,
you've got it.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit real briefly about Unreal Engine. That's another catchphrase everybody talks about. Like, oh, you have to use Unreal for virtual production. It's like, well, yes and no for certain types. So do you want to address that?
Yeah. So Unreal Engine are definitely that's okay. So let's start from the top. Unreal Engine is a real-time graphics engine that was originally developed by Epic Games for a video game, for a multiplayer first-person shooter called Unreal Tournament. So that's where the name came from. They haven't changed the name, but since then, the actual engine has expanded dramatically in its complexity. So they've got stuff where they're able to do compositing in real time. That's a tool called Composure. And they have a tool called End Display that allows you to do these types of multi-screen backdrops. And then they're a platform that people can develop on. So you can create content that then you can play back on Unreal Engine. And then you can also create tools, which is what we do at ARwall, that actually make it easier to do these types of illusions for filmmaking.
That's good lead in there. You even know it. But first, let's touch on one important point about Unreal. Now, granted, there's caveats, heavy caveats to this, but
yes.
Unreal is free.
Yes. So if you're a creator and you're just looking to like make some content with Unreal, you're not necessarily developing like software or anything like that, then it's relatively free for you to use. There's costs associated with like getting some assets, getting some required tools or plugins that you might need. But I just think this is true that Unreal Engine, I think, is open source. There's some caveats to that. Open source doesn't mean exactly the same thing that it used to mean when the idea of open source started. But yeah, it's possible to actually get the software, take a look at the source, and then actually develop custom solutions.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about ARwall, because I think what makes you special, and I'm sure you have competitors, but we're talking about you today. You have a special sauce. So you may be using Unreal, but there's more to what you offer as a company that makes it even easier to work with.
Yeah, exactly. One of the things, I'll let Jocelyn talk about this as well, but one of the things that we do is we help democratize the approach that filmmakers have to this type of technology. Common thing that we hear from filmmakers is they dive into Unreal Engine. Sometimes they're even fellows in the Unreal Fellowship, and then they start wanting to, like, let's generate some content. Let's partner up with some content creators, but they find that it's the technical hurdles are still too great for their expertise. So like, you know, filmmakers, we like software to be a certain way, some level of simplicity, some level of control. And we don't necessarily like to be like writing command line code or anything like that. So like what we did was create a version of the technology that has no coding, no programming, makes it very simple to use on set. We can actually display that. I don't know, Jocelyn, do you want to display?
Sure.
What are
If
you
you want to
displaying?
continue talking, I'll pull it up.
Okay, so so we can show you a little bit of what we've actually done.
So real quickly on this, I'm looking at this camera. We are actually on a stage that has two large LED walls, both powered by ARwall systems. And Jocelyn can show you a little bit. Some of these are obviously fully generated, computer generated ones in Unreal, so they're real time. So I'll let Renee and Jocelyn take it from here.
Step off so I can actually do it.
Okay, she's gonna step off.
All right, to do it under the
Okay,
light.
so yeah, let me give you some information first about what you're seeing here today. So we're at Soapbox Films in Burbank, and what we're showing off here is this is our older screen, our first screen. Behind us is a 20.5 by 11.5 foot, 1.5 millimeter screen, and then we have a second screen over here, same pixel density. This is a slightly smaller screen, but still very high quality, and this is a newer screen. So you're seeing something pretty rare here, like, you know, basically we have a loaner kind of screen setup right here that we're working on, and you get to see both of these. So what's happening is this camera right here actually has trackers that are sitting on top of it, and as this camera moves, then the backdrops will create a parallax illusion.
Let you pan over there, Patrick, and to the screen, and you can kind of see how there's a parallax to his camera. If you stand up, so see how it creates a parallax through the camera.
So all right, so Jocelyn has brought up our software here. So this is there's two versions right now. One is okay, so this one that's right here behind my head. Sorry, this is a little bit awkward. This one that's right here behind my head, this is called the ARFX launcher. This is actually a piece of software where you do not even need to open Unreal Editor in order to create these illusions. It comes with a scene pack. This is one of the scenes that is contained in it. It has quite a few other ones in it. So this is something that people can license for demos, whatever the case may be. You can see how easy it is to use. It's about as easy as I don't know if you can see, but it's about as easy as setting up a second monitor on your PC. It's super simple. And then the other one, the one that's over here, that is our ARFX plugin. This is something that you would open in Unreal Editor. This allows you to all the controls that you would need, and this is something that we developed over 4 years, and it resulted in something pretty simple and something pretty straightforward. There's a lot of magic happening under the hood on both of these. That's kind of what we do as a company. And so like some things you'll notice here is there's no coding, there's no blueprints, there's nothing like that. It's very, very simple to use the technology. In actuality, the launcher, the red one, is something that you can get up and running within 15 minutes of like receiving the kit. And that's, we've done that before with people, and it's pretty shocking when you get that happening.
Very cool. Very cool. Okay, I'm sure we'll get more into some of the details soon. Let's go talk a little bit about some of the things we were talking about earlier. Like for a filmmaker trying to get into this, what kind of things do they need to do to prep if they have a script that they feel has a virtual environment that they would like to, in ways that they can keep the cost low? Like for example, LED, what types of LED walls are there? And I know we talked about the pitch, but is there other concerns that they have to be aware of?
Sure. Do you want to take that? Why don't you take that?
Sure. So for LED walls, well, I guess if we're talking about different types of budgets and sizes of budgets, you're not actually tied to LED walls. I know that's the most popular, and it is like the most beautiful version because you get this like beautiful light spill on your actors. And if you get enough LED walls around your actor, you may not even have to light them properly. You can just let the LED walls light them because all of that information is all within these scenes. And so if you hook up the lights or the LED walls around your actor, you can get that like seamless, beautiful volume of light without having, and while the camera is moving, which is really cool. So that is kind of like your upper budget version of what you might do with LED walls. And at ARwall, we kind of and at here at Soapbox, we've actually done a version of this that's a little bit cheaper, which basically we've done versions where like the main screen that you see behind me is what we call the hero wall, and that will have like the smallest millimeter pitch, which means that when the camera is shooting right on that wall, you get a really nice seamless look. This is what your kind of effect you're getting. And if the user the interfaces weren't up, that like would look like a seamless background behind us. And then the other walls that you would use as lighting around your actor, that actually can be a lower pitched wall to kind of save money, because each of these walls can be pretty pricey to purchase or to rent. And if you get a lower pitched a higher pitch wall. So if you get like a 4.5 or an 8 millimeter pitch wall, they tend to go down dramatically in pricing, just because you don't actually plan on shooting the camera on those walls, but they can still provide really great lighting around your actor. And then if you wanted to like go even lower on the budget, you don't even have to go with LED walls. We can do with projections. Projection walls are, also a great way to do virtual production. Everyone on set can still see it. The only difference is that, it won't be as bright as an LED wall. So depending on the scene and the lighting effect you want on the actors, that can make, if it works with a projection wall, that can absolutely save a whole lot of money, because I think, a really nice projector can be around $150,000. At least that was what it was before the pandemic started. I'm not sure how the pricing has changed since then. Compared to like if you wanted to purchase an LED wall, they tend to start around $250,000, which is at least $100,000 more, and that's really just for like one wall. And then if you want to go even lower in the budget, you can actually use television screens. So let's say you don't actually need a huge wall behind your actor. Let's say you're actually just needing it in a window on like a kitchen set, or like through a doorway. There are large TVs, even consumer ones that they go up to like 90 inches, and then there are these really large TVs that are about 128 inches in diameter, diagonally. So that actually tends to be like a pretty sizable wall that you could have one or two actors right in front of. And then a television is just much cheaper than either of the options before. The LED wall is obviously the most expensive, and then the projection walls tend to be kind of in the middle range. And then television screens, they can be as cheap as a few $100 to be able to purchase that, and then getting the same effect. And while I'm speaking on televisions, I guess I should also mention that we do have a home studio version of our technology. It works exactly the same that you see happening here. We actually have a little box right here.
Maybe Patrick can get a shot of this.
Yeah, this is basically a nice, cute little box that you could put next to your living room television.
Mark, can we show that?
Yeah,
camera too. There you go.
Right here. And
AirFX Home Studio. That's the name of it. If you're interested in this, you can go to our website. This is basically a kit, so that this is the actual like PC box that's powering the processing and everything like that. But this comes with a kit with tracking, with cables, with a mount for your smartphone, everything that you would need to basically connect your camera to your TV and get these kind of parallax solutions. It also comes with a scene starter pack, 10 different maps that have different lighting iterations, beautiful different backdrops. So that's over 100 different backdrops that we're including with this. So that's available now if people are interested. So that's basically like the rough answer is, if you're interested in doing it yourself, then you have to purchase hardware and get software that allows you to do that, as well as the tracking technology. We put all those pieces together into a simple kit that's called AirFX Home Studio. If you're interested in hiring someone to accomplish this for you, you can approach a virtual production supervision team. ARwall happens to be one of those teams. There's not that many of us in the industry, so we're happy to answer any questions that people may have, because we're one of the few. And basically, it starts off with a conversation about your production, and then usually we're handed a script, or we're handed pages or a specific sequence. And as supervisors, our job generally starts with turning the script and pages into an actual budget and number and plan. And usually that plan will include time, costs, thoughts about the size of the equipment, type of equipment, and then also in some situations, suggestions like, hey, this since we're going to have this screen up for this scene, we have these 2 other scenes that would require the exact same type of screen setup. It would be really simple to just add these onto that shoot, that type of thing.
Great. Kayla, if you were trying to get a question or two, I couldn't hear you, so try it again. There we go. Oh, it cut out. You got to hold the button down harder. I think I got some of that about production sound.
Sound.
Yeah. How does that interact with the virtual production side?
So that's something that not a lot of work has been done on. There is some that emerging stuff that I can mention. One of the things that can happen in these real-time engines is that you can actually associate audio, 3D audio, with different spaces. Like, can actually have an object that is emitting the sound. So as you get closer to the object, as you rotate around, it shifts around in stereo to you and stuff like that. So I'm not saying that productions necessarily use that, but there is a world in the future in which you would grab that kind of metadata of like, what audio is doing this or that, and then you could actually output like it's kind of crazy, like wild sound from the engine to inform the audio editor and mixer. Like, this is kind of like what it should be like over here, and then when we walk over here, it's a little bit less like that, or whatever the case may be. As I mentioned, there's not a lot of work being done in syncing audio to these types of effects, but I think in the future there will be, because obviously these are things that happen in game engines. Game engines have audio, and all that audio has to be motivated by the environment. So we can piggyback on that.
Yeah, it's 2 things. It's new technology, so there's still things to be discovered. And at the same time, the more complexity you add to it like that, the more expensive it's going to be. So we're trying to keep it indie, think post sound maybe and things like that. So let's jump forward. Let me have to look at my watch. Yeah, I want to leave time. Let's jump forward and invite Chris in. Chris is with Soapbox Studios, Soapbox Films.
Chris,
and Chris, I don't even know your
Allender.
last name. You're gonna have to.
It's Allender.
Allender.
Yeah,
And
Chris
you're the
Allender.
CEO, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the stage process of this whole virtual. One of the things always people want to know is, you have this great image back there. Let's say it's a desert. Maybe Jocelyn's going to pull up a desert. We have a desert.
We have a desert.
But you want to continue that. You need to interact or integrate that to a foreground, so people are walking around here on a desert as well.
Right.
What's the experience there, and what's the tips you have for that?
Yeah. I mean, ideally, if you have the money, we've got a desert over here now. There's you would have a production designer, art director, a traditional type of team like that build. If it were a desert, you would probably bring in some sort of steel deck risers or something with some couple inch curb on it, and you'd actually fill it in with sand and jump through as many hoops as you could to try to get that level to come up and meet where the screen exists.
So there's a little overlap, so it blends.
And that's the hardest thing, I think, is to have like a floor and that run into each other. And there's a bunch of behind the scenes specials about the Mandalorian where it's
suddenly really hot.
Yeah, it's
really hot in here. But that's the integration. So any other tips in terms of stages with how people should approach, like if an indie film wanted to come and use?
I mean, if you're not showing their feet, it becomes a lot easier, because then you start to build in foreground pieces, and it starts to sell the illusion a lot better too, to have not only this parallax in the background that's changing when the camera moves, but also foreground elements. Like we just did a commercial a few weeks ago where it took place in it was just a guy on his laptop, kind of like this setup down here, although it was a standing desk, and he was in a loft apartment, like a nice downtown apartment. And so that was all just completely fake. We bought it. We bought the set on Unreal Marketplace for like $40. We spent a little time relighting it ourselves so that it looked the way we wanted. And then we just had like a wooden table, a laptop, a couple plants, and a lamp, and that was our whole production design for the whole process. And it really looked great. I mean, it sold it very well. Our assistant editors didn't even know that we had shot it on a virtual wall.
That brings up a
That
good
makes
point.
us super happy.
You actually have we have a clip here. Can you, Kayla, play the subway clip? Wow, that's great.
Yeah.
That's really cool. So you were during the clip, Chris was making some comments about the integration there. Go ahead and
Yeah.
mention
So
those.
that was just a test when we first got this thing set up. That was like a 3-person crew. We had 3 or 4 lights. And that's a free asset. That whole subway is something that's available. I don't know if it's still free, but every month, like Unreal Engine gives out free stuff. And they had this really cool subway that was, I mean, really well textured and modeled. I think I added my own kind of lights, like a little. I barely even know how to use Unreal Engine, but I know how to use Cinema 4D and stuff like that. So it's pretty quick to get into it. I added like a little looping light going down, like as if there was a subway tunnel going by, and we had, I think, an LED, 1 or 2 LED kind of lights that had like the built-in like presets you could put in, like police siren or whatever, and it was, so that was doing that to our actress because we didn't have any side panels for that. And it was a good example of the kind of foreground stuff where we brought in a C-stand. That was the pole she was holding, but it kind of looked like
great, yeah.
a subway pole.
Until you see it at the
yeah.
end, I just thought it was a subway pole,
Yeah.
but then you realize, oh, no.
Yeah,
so
it's a C-stand.
we had some old plexiglass that we use for when we're like spraying stuff at our lens that we had in the storage room. So we brought that out, clamped that up, and put graffiti on it and smeared soap on it so it looked like an old window, and shot through that. And that was just such a great opportunity. If you've ever done post compositing and green screen work, that shooting through glass, or especially dirty glass or stuff that's refractive or smeared up, and that's just very difficult. Very difficult to clean up and make look good. Very difficult to get shallow focus hair to look nice. And even if you're handheld and close, like this camera over here, just even being able to see your tracking markers if you put them up to track your background is very difficult. And all that stuff you get in camera for free. And when you get into post, it's exciting because you have like an hour of footage, that's all usable and ready to go, versus just like a bunch of green stuff that you have to pick and choose, how much. If you're doing it yourself, that's one thing, but that's time and money. that you don't have to spend.
No, that's great.
One of the like things I want to point out on that clip is just how important still production design and lighting still are to creating the illusion. Like we can do all our work at ARwall to create an incredible backdrop, but it's really about the work that the cinematographer and the lighting team does to wrap that light and that world around the actor. Which is why we've been focused. Some of the recent work that we've done is so focused on immersive lighting. And I think we do have a video that shows off some of that stuff as well. So this is the cuboid video. This is very new. I don't think anyone's ever.
Oh, is
seen
that the
this.
music video?
I
I don't think I loaded that.
Great. So that what you just saw is something new that we've developed. It's meant to be an affordable approach. Instead of going to the Mandalorian route and spending all that cash, this is meant to be a solution that provides the same result, but at the absolute lowest kind of budget-minded level.
Yeah, so that's a good example of the whole interactivity, creating interactive light around everything. So that's great. We had a question about depth of field, the depth of field in that subway. How is that created?
So you can, in Unreal Engine, you can actually dial in fake depth of field, but so that the things that are very far away are more out of focus than the things that are close. And that's nice to kind of get that in a little bit, but we're really here, really 8, 9, 10 feet from the screen, and anything at that plane is going to behave as if it's 8, 9, 10 feet away from from the subject that's in focus. So you get all that pretty much for free. And usually if you're that wide, there's not that much depth of field happening in the background. You're not shooting like a F1 or anything.
But you're saying with the system you can
dial it in,
adjust it so that
so you can fake it. If you say, I know that I'm going to be shallow depth of field, and maybe your actor is a little bit closer to the screen for some reason, then you can add in extra depth of field there, but then the whole screen is going to get affected by its proximity to the
also because it's a 3D world, are you dialing in the depth of field in depth?
Yes.
That's what I mean. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. So this is an instance of where we have it dialed in on digital, and then you're also getting Jocelyn's all over this. It's digital, and then it's dialing in. It's getting some from the camera, so we're combining the focus. And just to be clear, this is one of the remaining like major technical hurdles for this type of illusion. Is like, defocus doesn't stack. You don't get bokeh and then get more bokeh, like, because you digitally defocus it, right? So this is something that I think still remains a hurdle. Some of the advice that I would give is whenever you are changing your lens length, you do want to change the ratio of camera distance to subject and everything, because what'll happen is if you cut from a long lens to a short lens, to your wide and everything like that, and you don't change the camera, your subject distance or anything, you're going to end up with the exact same like kind of level of bokeh on every single backdrop. So it's just something you wouldn't face unless you were doing in edit and you actually were like, oh gosh, the bokeh, looks exactly the same on every shot. So it's like just one of those insider tips that we've learned.
Kayla, let's bring up that sound question again. I don't think we answered it correctly. So Daniel says, how does working with virtual production tools change your approach to sound? Do you find production sound / dialogue easier to capture, more useful, or do you lean into doing more audio in post?
Yeah. So it's a little more like, for instance, on the spaceship background if you were on a location with that many vehicles, it would be horrible, right? And here it's completely silent. So that's, an advantage that you have here, where we're not hearing the wind of this desert blowing all around us and things like that. I mean,
we're in space now. We're not in the desert.
Yeah, and in space, no one can hear your production
But
sound anyway.
but your actual production sounds pretty clean too,
Very
because you're in a
clean.
stage.
Yeah.
As opposed to like the driving reference I made. If you had to do a driving shot, I actually did a web series where the whole episode was driving in a car, and I actually had to shoot it for real. And I ended up doing green screen, which made a lot of sense, but it would have been so much easier with LED. But you want to preserve that production sound as much as you can, because you can always fix that, and not fix it in post, but enhance it in post.
And these have some sound, but it's pretty minimal. I mean, each one of these is like a tiny TV all stacked together, and they do have fans, but I mean, we also have the air conditioning on right now, and it's much louder than the screen.
And really, still, it's very quiet here. What else we have, Kayla?
Yeah, so in other words, not that many production sound stuff. I guess unless you consider just the fact that you're in studio to be a benefit.
So Charles says, does the current tech allow the camera to focus onto the LED wall and into the virtual environment? That's a little bit what you were talking about, creating, you know, can you track a lens so that it knows the depth?
So you can. We actually do have this as a solution. It's called ARFX Infinite with lens emulation. The problem, as you can imagine, is you rack focus the physical lens, right? And then it hits the surface of the screen. But then the digital camera at that point needs to take over. The other complexity is you generally don't want to be focusing on the plane of the screen. So like, how would you achieve that? You'd have to be slightly off. So there are people that are developing this. I think Moses is one of them. They have a solution where, like, basically you ride the shuttle, the focus shuttle, and you focus forward, and then at the point that it hits the surface of the screen, then the physical like servo stops, and then the virtual camera continues to rack focus into the environment. So there are people working on it, but it like, I don't want to say that it's like a perfect solution.
Yeah, the problem with that is you have to focus on the screen to see the screen, right? You can't focus 30 feet away from it; it'll be out of focus. And then, but your person or your foreground subject is, so if you focus past them to the screen and then keep going, they're not going to change, right? So I find that every time someone gets involved in this, they're very concerned about depth of field early on. It's a lot of the questions that they have, and those tend to go away because you're not really, if you're here to film the screen, then just like record the screen as an element. Don't shoot it. Like just export it and put it into your
It's
cut.
a background. Treat it as a background.
Exactly.
So, All right, what else we got, Kayla? I'm leaning in so I can read the question. Abraham says, does Unreal Engine come with camera tracking technology, or do developers make their own solutions?
So currently Unreal Engine does not hasn't created a tracking technology. However, most people have standardized onto the HTC Vive system, and for like the ARFX home studio, that's a good place for beginners to start. So that's generally what we recommend, and that is bundled in with the home studio, so you don't have to get your own tracking tech in those instances.
That's cool. All right, Kayla. I'm assuming we have more, right? Okay, good. Ryan, hi Ryan. For productions like The Mandalorian, what percentage of shots get final pixels directly from the LED wall in camera compared to the shots that still have to replace the background in post? Or let's even address that to clean it.
I think it's lower than they want you to believe. There's a lot of work going on The Mandalorian.
There's a lot of cleanup, but I mean, like, that's the short answer, is that there's going to continue to be cleanup, particularly in those instances where you do want to change something in the background. We worked on Chris and I worked on a project where we had a lot of green screen elements that had to be placed into the backdrops, but we didn't necessarily have those green screen elements prior to shooting with the LED wall. So those had to be placed in post. All those green screen elements had to be placed in post. So I think in most instances, whenever you're using this technology, it is also going to be, an effects heavy production. So in those instances, there does still tend to be a lot of cleanup.
Okay.
Yeah, and it really just depends on.
I don't have a ratio.
Yeah, on the project. I think there's more than you think, but then there's other ways. The more experience you get with the technology, the more you can, just like any technology, you kind of know how to circumvent extra work for you down the line, and
Yeah.
you start to get smarter about it, and there's less and less. But there's other times where you just have to. But it's still going to look better in some cases than having just done it all green.
Yeah.
And then we also have the option. They've built in tools now where you can just hit a button and make it green or
Yeah.
make it blue. It's like, well, we don't have this background.
Yeah.
Boom.
just
Now we
go-
have a green screen. We
yeah.
don't have to light a rag. It's pretty cool that
Yeah,
that
that's
can just
cool.
go
It's a
on.
common enough request that we just, we have a thing where, okay, pull the green screen up. It has some markers. And we can also do previs for those as well.
right.
Okay, we
I
got
got it.
another one. All right,
Hey,
this
Juliana.
one's for us.
Hey, Juliana, by the way.
Hey,
Um,
Juliana.
She's a friend of mine. Not that you aren't all friends of mine. What's the smallest pixel pitch ARwall has used on a project, and is there a limiting factor at a point where it makes no difference to the eye or camera if it's any smaller?
Yeah, so there's
Let's also add, what is the smallest pitch that exists?
okay. Yeah. Okay. So we have standardized at 1.5 millimeter, and the reason for that is because it tends to be a good balance of cost and quality, and it also allows the stages to be a lot smaller. So here we're in about a 40 by 60 foot a space. It's a little bit larger than that, but I'm generalizing. It's a relatively small space. It's this is stage A here at this, and it's a beautiful soundproof facility. But to get the most out of this space, you have to have the pixel density a lot tighter. So the higher the pixel pitch, you got into 2.6 and 3.6 and that type of stuff, the further the camera away has to be. Yeah, and like one rule of thumb to use on that is you take the pitch size, you multiply that by 2,000 or 3,000. We use 2,000. And then you arrive at the minimum distance from camera to screen. So 1.5 millimeter times 2,000, that's 3 meters. So, 3 meters, it has to be 3 meters away. That's the general guidance. So there's two restrictions that you're going to have. One is space, space and budget. Like you're not going to have the space and budget to actually get a larger screen and everything like that, but you still want to be able to get nice looking images, so you're going to have to go lower pitch. However, it is more expensive to go lower pitch, so that's another consideration. Most of the people that we're talking to are anywhere between 1.5 and 2.6.
And what is the smallest that exists?
And what is the smallest that exists? Somebody was talking about a 0.7 millimeter. And just to be clear, that means that it's less than 1 millimeter. And that's starting to get into the realm where like a consumer TV has that type of pixel density.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. But they did on the Mandalorian, they actually replaced their whole screen for the second season, I believe.
With the tighter pitch?
It was too big, and it was causing, they had to use a large format camera. They had to use 65 millimeter.
Yeah. And their screen's
production.
huge, so they
It
were
was
able to
huge.
get away from it a
Yeah,
little bit.
but
in
they
the
were
first
running
season.
into moire issues
Yeah.
on the first season, and they had to, I don't know any inside stuff. I think it's in the documentaries, but they replaced it all.
Watch the documentary. It actually is really good. I loved it.
What's
it's on
the
Disney Plus.
minimum budget?
So Fab 2 Productions says, what's the minimum budget per shooting day needed with this technology, excluding crew, just the studio and technology? You were talking about that a little bit, Chris,
Yeah.
about what.
I think our list rate is around 10,000 a day for the stage, the power, the screen, a person who actually operates the computer, so that you have somebody who knows what's going on. On top of that, you have to create your assets. I mean, or you can just use pre-made stuff, but you either have to make them yourself, hire an artist. But then you're usually spending a lot. So, like a regular stage in Hollywood's probably 3,000 to 6,000 a day for just an empty room. So, fairly affordable compared to Mandalorian size screens. I know there's a couple of those around town now, and they're in the $70,000 to $120,000 a day.
Like you can spend money if
range.
you want. Like that's the answer. You can spend money here. I mean, 10K a day is kind of the basement to think about. And then I should mention we have kind of like a standing offer with a number of record labels of like 30,000. 30,000 to do like a music video. So that basically what that means is that's the creative involved. That is a half day of tech rehearsal, which is mandatory. We have to bring in the camera and lens ahead of the shoot, and then the actual day of shooting, and the creative that generally goes along with that, which is like one to three scenes depending on complexity. So that's hopefully that gives people an idea.
Yeah, and the important thing to remember, not that you're going to talk them into doing it for free, but I have personal experience of calling up Jocelyn and Renee and saying, I have a project, and working with them about it. So there's a lot of gray area in this whole world. Make sure to connect with somebody like ARwall or Soapbox and work with them on it. And you may discover either less expensive ways to approach things or more creative ways to spend your money. It's never going to be, it is new technology. It's not going to be, if you're making a $5,000 movie, you're probably going to have trouble.
Yeah, it's not an alternative to shooting a thing in your friend's apartment,
right?
Living room, but it's an alternative to going to the desert with a huge crew.
Exactly.
It's alternative to, or what's really exciting is when you start to do multiple locations. If we had a scene in a jungle or whatever like this, and the next scene was in the desert, how much would that cost us? I mean, imagine we wanted to shoot it in the same day. That would be impossible.
The crew move and just
So and so you want to do this at night, right after we shot the daytime thing. Like she can hit a button, probably, and make it night. We didn't plan on that, but she can change the lighting like
she's
that.
Talented.
She's gonna do something.
Oh, that's nice.
But the amount of time it would take for 20 grips to move all the lights, re-rig all this, the gaffers, the art department, all that stuff, and it's in the can. Or say you've got an actor you've got 2 actors, 3 actors in the scene. One of them can't be here because of COVID or whatever it is. We can dial this back up in 2 weeks with the push of a button instead of storing all the stuff in a warehouse and tearing it down and trucking it back over and building it and getting, it just adds up.
Yeah, you got to take the whole picture into play when you. Okay, what else we got, Kate? We have just a little bit more time. Hey, Kate. Kate Carson says, what are a few key things an independent filmmaker needs to know about filming in virtual production to demystify the virtual production process for low budget projects? Kate always asks great questions.
I can take this. So there's 2 main things that you need to remember. One is that all the environments need to be created ahead of time. So we're returning to kind of a traditional set design and set construction method where you create all the sets and then you go inside them and you shoot, right? Which is not the way that it's done with traditional like green screen compositing and that type of stuff. So that's the first thing to understand. The second thing to understand is your tech rehearsal is going to be where you solve a lot of the technical issues and also where the cast and crew get onboarded onto the technology. So those tech rehearsals are very important, and generally we recommend half a day for every shoot day. And the general rule is for every hour that you spend on tech rehearsal, you're going to save yourself 2 to 4 hours on set, and that's a massive consideration.
There's also pre-production is longer, it's just longer, but post-production is potentially way shorter, and you're making a lot of decisions early and getting a lot of more people on board early, but you got to be decisive.
If I were to answer that question, you're combining more so than ever the art department, the visual effects department, set design, cinematography, obviously directing and such, all very early in the process. No longer can people just work in a vacuum and say, we'll just fix it in post. If you're doing this virtual production.
You need a production designer who is at least on board with this idea or savvy. You're still going to have a production designer, but you may not have 20 carpenters. Like you'll have grip, or you'll have CG generalists or people like that who you can hire from around the world if you need, and they don't have to be local to Burbank or Los Angeles. So that's kind of exciting because it gives you a lot more opportunity to hire the best people in the world on every project.
And there's a project that we've been talking about, and there's an integration between who's going to make the models for it was a sci-fi thing, who's going to make the models for the background, and then post-production visual effects has to do a certain number of effects of their own. So they need to work with the pre-production and art department model builders, and also make sure it works in Unreal, because the post visual effects don't work necessarily in Unreal. So there's a lot of communication that needs to happen. So I think that's the key, which is always a key with filmmaking, but communication.
I mean, the collaborative aspect is ratcheted up so much more, since those visual effects artists, those CG generalists, they're right there. I mean, on set, or in some cases in a Zoom chat, collaborating at a very early stage, which means that you can, a lot of the uncertainty that a production designer has about, like, okay, how's my thing gonna translate into digital, usually that's something that they don't even touch. They're like on another project, and some artist is doing that months or even a year later. Instead of that, like they can actually get a video walkthrough or even open up the scene and take a look at it and go like, oh, it doesn't look right, or it needs a little bit more of this kind of patina or that. So that type of stuff is really key, and yeah, I think that's an important part of the process. Is like, I think most people would imagine that this is a visual effects category. Like this, a lot of this work that we're doing is very visual effects oriented and everything like that. It does tend to be a lot of production design. A lot of the artists that we hire, they are like architects. Their background in architecture and that type of stuff. So that is something else to understand about this.
Okay. I think we have time for one more question. Kayla. Oh, she put it up already. Heth Film says, could you theoretically put another tracker on the person off screen and track the actor's position relative to the real world tracked camera and use this to control the depth of field in Unreal somehow? That's a very specific question.
I mean, I love the ingenuity. I love the ingenuity. You want a job? You can come and figure it out for us. I mean, like, I don't know exactly what you're suggesting here, but the idea of having tracking the actor is something that we've been considering. So there's lots of trackers that we can place on the body of an actor and have them do this, that, or the other. The other thing I can mention is like there are some instances where people do need digital props. Like they need an object in the background there to move, according to some cue. So in those cases, we can use a tracker to like engage that cue. And then I should also mention we do work with depth cameras, and some of the work that we do is tracking humans to have an effect in the background environment. However, we don't have any instances of doing that. It's a relatively emerging portion of our business, so I don't know. I can't talk about it that much. Sorry.
Well, let's make sure we put up ARwall's ARwall.co is your website, right?
Yes.
And Soapbox Films. .com as well. So make sure to reach out. You get inundated with people asking questions, but that's probably a good thing. Let me ask real quickly, each of you, what are you most excited about the future of virtual production? Renee.
Okay, the future of virtual production. I think for me, what I'm excited about is the ease that the technology is gonna be. I think I've lived through those instances of green screen being one of those things where like it's extremely difficult and like you sat there for hours, and to the point where like somebody's clicking it on their phone and doing it instantly, right? And I think that this technology is gonna get to that point. We hope to be one of the companies that is pushing that forward. But to me, there's I think an estimated 500 million video creators out there in the world right now, most of them in China and India. And I think handing these tools to those people is going to result in something super unexpected and exciting.
Yeah. Great. Chris?
I'm excited for it. I think right now people think about this as kind of the total solution for a filmmaking option. And I'm excited for it to turn into just another tool where if you have a 15 or 20 day feature film, even an independent film, but to think about tacking one of those days maybe is a virtual wall day, where you're going to do it at the end of the production. You do a couple pickups, because if you have nice location photography from, say you had a really expensive day where you're at Union Station or somewhere like that, and you had your wide shots and all your people come in and it's beautiful, but it cost you way more than the rest of your production just to get your crew there and to lock it down, all that stuff. But you've got good reference photography. You can throw that into, you don't have to do like CG created backgrounds. You can use photographic backgrounds that are mapped onto 3D geometry. Then you can do you can do pickups, or months later you could do pickups of like, oh, we filmed this in the Grand Canyon, but we need a new line of dialogue. Do the pickups like that. Or you just do, you get in there, you only had an hour while the sun was perfect, you get the wide shots, the master take, and then you come in here from 9 to 5 with the air conditioner and
do your coverage,
and do that.
Yeah.
Or say you have a movie where someone's traveling across the country, like you said, and there's half of it's in a car or something, whatever, but there's like some scene that's like an eighth of a page. The writer thinks they're so clever that they they wrote this scene, and the producers are like, oh my god, we can't do one scene at night in Illinois in a phone booth outside of a diner that's like for 2 lines of dialogue. Like that's gonna be a whole day out of our. But say you have 5 of those scenes in your movie, you do them in one day in here. And you
Rent the phone booth. You
rent
put
a
it right
phone
here.
booth, and you put like a diner, and you do the whole thing through the glass and fake rain and all that stuff. It's 2 lines of dialogue, but it looks great. And then you switch it and you do a daytime scene where they're on a cliff overlooking the ocean, and that stuff's exciting to me. And just to work it in the same way you were looking through your budget, you're like, oh, we're gonna do 2 days of Steadicam, or we're gonna get a techno crane on this day because we're in a cool place. We're gonna do green screen on this day. We're gonna do a water tank, and we're gonna do 3 days of virtual wall.
Yeah.
And
That's smart. Yeah, using it as a tool, just like
Yeah.
all those other things you mentioned. Great. Well, thank you for joining
Yeah.
us, both of you.
you.
And thank you. Which camera am I looking at here? Thank you for joining us. And please make sure to visit ARwall.co and soapboxfilms.com. And we'll see you next time at the next collective event.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, John. Thank you, Chris.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jocelyn.
I'm looking at the wrong camera here.